Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Today is Tuesday, November 7th. How's everybody going? Did y'all watch the OpenAI Dev Day yesterday?
No, I was busy coding to their
Okay.
That's the only correct answer.
API. I caught the tail end of it, right? But I mainly was just looking at their
So
REST.
I got sent a really good summary on Twitter that I can put here, and I'll put it in general. This was a pretty cool little thing. So they've got the GPT-4 Turbo model with 128K context window, which is awesome, and it's 50% cheaper. They've got the custom GPTs that are specialized for specific tasks and the custom GPT store. And then you've got the Assistance API where you can build autonomous agents that have access to tools. That's really relevant to what we're doing. And then the human quality speech with the text-to-speech models. I haven't gotten a chance to look at that, but I'm excited for that because I use 11 Labs all the time. They got the copyright shield, so they'll go to court for you, is what I heard. And then the new Whisper model, as well as the custom models for enterprise, and that's all really cool stuff. Um, but what do y'all think about it?
I
when
think
when are we getting it?
Right.
Oh, it's all out now. It rolled out at 1 p.m. yesterday.
Oh,
Cool.
okay.
Actually, 12:48 to be precise. Is when I downloaded the SDK. So I got all the assistant stuff working last night. I have some gripes with it, but I have it all working. So anyway, it's not perfect. The polling thing that they have it sucks and it's stupid. But outside of that, it seems to work.
the Threads API. So I was going to talk about this. The Threads API and Agent Protocol has a fair amount of isomorphism, or I don't know if that's the right term, but like similarity. So curious, Steve, how you think about that?
Their Threads API is generally okay. My problem was really just with the run API that you have to use, right? I have for the Teams AI library that I'm working on right now. By the way, everyone up the chain to Satya and Adela was super stoked that I got it all working yesterday. But in Teams in particular, we have this problem that we have group chat, and so we have multiple people that need to be able to talk to the assistant simultaneously. And the problem with the Run API, it's polling based, but I get why it's polling based. The issue is that once you're in a run, the thread is locked, and so you can no longer add new messages or start additional runs. And so that becomes problematic whenever you're in a group chat scenario because you can have multiple people trying to talk to the assistant at the same time. So what I ended up having to do is I had to create this thing. If you're familiar with synchronization terms, there's this concept of like semaphores and mutexes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to create essentially a distributed mutex to basically lock and essentially queue up all inbound messages in a distributed way so that I made sure that only one person at a time was trying to create a new run. And even then, there's a very small window where two people could try to create a run at the same time, which means one failed. So anyway, outside of that, the Threads API itself seems fine. Their general list management APIs seem pretty good. The SDK actually takes care of all the work of pagination so you can ask for like messages. They come sorted by default in descending order by created time, which is what you want. And they can, in theory, return like infinite list of messages to you, and they take care of all the management of the context window whenever you call the assistant. So I think pretty good outside of the run API.
The issue that you mentioned, can you kind of clarify, you mentioned when you kick off a run, the thread gets locked.
Yeah.
What
You
does
can
that
no
mean? Like,
longer add it. You can no longer add messages to that thread or
okay.
start new runs. There can only be one run that's in an in progress state at any given point. So basically, what they have you do is instead of just posting the message to the assistant, like I have a whole nother theory about how they should have done this, right? Okay, but it's not the way that they did, right? Okay, so the way that they did it is that you have to post messages to the thread. So let's say that I get an input from a user. I have to basically have a thread that I then use the thread API to add that input message to. Then you have to start a run, which basically starts the assistant like responding to that last message that was added to the thread, right? Okay. And so then you have to poll to basically wait for the assistant to enter any one of a number of states, right? One could be completed, it could be a failure, it could be expired. There's also this request for tools, response required from tools, right? Which requires you to then upload your tool output, right? I have all of that stuff working. And so, so there's multiple kind of states that you could end up with, but you cannot start a new run or add messages to the thread until the last run gets out of the in progress state. And so that means while the assistant is thinking, it can only be thinking about one thing at a time. And then once it's done, if it goes to a completed state, you then have to go and list off all the messages from the thread. You need to be tracking the last message ID so that you can then find any new messages because the assistant is capable of posting multiple responses.
Do you know if you can have multiple assistants running on
can.
different threads? Oh, okay.
Yeah. You could even probably have the same assistant with multiple threads. You could just you can only start one run per thread. So one way to approach it would be, we have in the bot framework in the Teams environment, we have this concept of conversation ID. So I just basically tied our concept of conversation ID to thread ID, and so I just create a thread per conversation. Because then I have a mechanism to store that thread ID and associate it with like in a mapping table and associate it. I was really struggling with how to deal with the run thing. Then I realized that actually to figure out whenever someone comes in, if I want to know if there's a run that's active, I can actually query I can ask them to list off the runs, and I just ask for one result. I ask for the last run, and then I can check the state of that to see what its current status is, and then I know whether or not I need to block and wait for it. And at some point, I'm going to create a post on the community forums that really walk through in detail just how I tackled the problem. But I'm pretty sure I've implemented as best as you can implement it. It's probably better than their implementation at this point. I doubt that they've ever really, they probably have a UI affordance that prevents them from trying to, the user submitting more than one message, but we don't have that luxury.
So, so this is kind of directly addressing Swifty's comments from last week, which is having kind of a container concept that holds, like in agent protocol land, our understanding of what a task is. In this case, it seems like, if my understanding is correct, Steve will correct me if I'm wrong, but thread is basically that overarching container, and then messages is like our version of a task, and then runs is our version of a step.
I'd say that that's probably pretty close, right? And then they have this concept of run steps, right? And so that's where tool execution kind of comes into play. And so basically what happens is whenever they hit that they want to run a tool, and this really only crops up if you pass them in a list of functions, that's the only tool external tool. So whenever you create your assistant, you basically give it a definition and you say, here's your tools I want to use, like code interpreter or whatever. You can add files to it and they'll do RAG for you, right? Which is kind of cool. But then you can also give them a list of functions, right, of tools that you want them to execute. And then they can now return to you with the current functions protocol, they can only return one function at a time. With the assistance platform, they can actually return you an array of functions. I actually had to tweak my stuff, right? Because basically what they want you to do is they want you to go and run all of the functions, and then you need to return them back an array of the tool outputs. So they basically give you a tool ID, which is the name of the function to run, a set of arguments, and then for each function, then you should run them in sequence. You have to collect all of the tool output, and then you pass them back in. They have this submit tool output REST API that you call, and you pass them back in like an array of all of those tool outputs, and then they will continue to run. And so you're not out of the run yet, right, from their perspective. So they may then turn around and call more tools, or at some point they'll enter a completed state, and at which point the assistant should have responded with one or more assistant messages. And so then you have to pull you have to call list messages so that you can get the list of responses from the agent. But it does sort of, there's a bit of an overlap between the task stuff. I need to get my head, I'm still like, grappling with like, I've looked at this for one day. And so I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it too, and then I'll need to map it to like the task concepts. But there's probably some inspiration that can be drawn here. So, like I said, the only thing I don't like is the way the run works.
And for people who don't know, I posted the schema, like a example REST endpoint on the chat in this lounge, and so you guys can take a look and see. It's in the docs. Yeah.
Does anybody have access to their UI for building GPTs, or is it just the API right now for most people?
I do have access because I was in person there at the Dev Day, and it's here. Do you guys want? Should we try something? I'm happy to share my
Sure.
screen.
Plus, she has $500 in credits, which is pretty awesome.
We can play around with it.
Ooh, yeah.
Congrats
Okay,
on the $500.
That was
Oh,
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first 5 was amazing, and then,
So yeah, what do you guys want to do? We can build, explore. Let's see, we can create a GPT. Is this what should we make something?
yeah.
What should we make?
Make it write Washington to a file.
Yeah. Any other ideas?
I've only made a math tutor so far. I did get it
Can
to
you
do
even
linear
write
algebra.
files?
What about like
Okay,
a grammar tutor, something different we haven't seen? It's something I constantly am using GPT-4 because I'm a terrible writer.
me how to write better.
And I have to explain to it every time, only affect the grammar, all the little things we have to explain every time.
Oh yeah, someone also in the coming weeks. Oh, okay.
Oh no, John.
Grammar guide for this GPT. Does it sound good to you? Sure. You guys can see my screen, right? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, this is cool seeing how it has like a builder agent, it seems.
Does anybody know if the configuration for the GPTs you build is accessible, like oh, okay,
Ooh.
there you go. Is that in the
I'm
API
assuming
as well?
it's probably the same as with assistants, and so there is a definition that you have to create assistant, and you can give it like basically a prompt and then the list of tools and an optional set of files that you use.
Yeah, so
And
it
then
created
meta
me an icon and then
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
if anybody saw that project Chirp, where it's like AI social accounts. That was doing similar things where it was generating the avatar and everything. I'm loving this new UI.
Yeah. Oh, you can also make the agent browse the web.
They
What
really
should
stepped
we
up.
ask it to browse?
Yeah. There were like 2 or 3 built-in tools.
You should make it correct grammar for different dialects or something, you know, like British to American English or something along those lines.
Oh, that's a great idea. A little like convert bot.
Right.
So what should we try? Can someone send me a text to use the grammar guide?
Yeah. Let me see. I got a lot of bad text.
Academic writing, business. Do you want academic writing, business communication, creative writing? Actually, maybe just academic, maybe.
Yeah, probably academic.
Precise, precise, and professional. Okay. Let me just copy anything online.
Somebody find a tweet that could be rewritten or needs to be edited or something.
Or just grab
Twitter.
go Google example of bad grammar or something
That's
like
a good
that.
idea too.
Okay.
Or better yet, ask ChatGPT to give us some bad grammar text.
I could
Or
text
just
my
go-
buddy. He has the worst grammar I know.
Bad grammar.
How often do you guys go to Google to do something and then you immediately switch to ChatGPT?
I actually don't go to Google anymore. I just go to, I mean, unless I'm searching for like I'm doing a nav query. That's what they call it, right?
Or you know, like the specific doc or something. Yeah.
Yeah, nav queries are basically the only thing I use it for anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I rarely find myself like going to Google and then being like, wait.
In this case, the article that John sent is already kind of scientific already. So, so let me just paste this.
That was if you were doing like British English to American. It has a few words that are different spellings.
So this one, it's giving us, I pasted it, it says specificity. Instead of utilizes a mixed method approach, specify briefly how each method contributes to your research. Active voice, conciseness, remove redundant phrases.
I generated this with GPT-4, so it's probably not too bad in grammar, but I was just trying to show off if you added the American British conversion thing.
We should try that actually. See if we can.
Can you also help
yeah.
with British English to American English conversion? Can you convert this
Updating
to
GPT? That's cool.
American English?
Kind of interested if you do like right click inspect tab and see what calls it's doing to their API when it's like updating the config.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I said again. Click to update the.
Oh,
update.
he was saying
Just to
open
watch the
the
network.
window, right? Press. I don't know if you guys assume all have MacBooks. I don't. So if you have the F12.
No.
Oh, like using developer tools to look at the network.
Yes, exactly. And then you can watch the network.
Watch the requests. or-
Yeah, I was just interested what they're doing with the builder.
Yeah. Ask for questions when needed, but try to be helpful. So
It's crazy how good
conversation.
it can be so quickly.
What's the network that it called? It's a little small for me to see.
Okay, so it's. Oh, can you guys see the developer tool?
Barely.
Yeah, it's a
Okay,
little small.
make it bigger.
There we go.
Okay.
Can you see better?
Conversation. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
back
so
on
it's
API
definitely
conversation.
calling a different API, but that sort of makes sense, right? Because they have to go through a proxy before they can call it.
Messages.
But it's using the same basic REST APIs that they released.
Yeah.
So.
They call it Gizmo Magic. If you scroll up a little bit, it says Gizmo Magic. I like that.
Oh yeah.
Gizmo Magic
Create. Yeah, that's neat.
GPT about to have following abilities. Yeah. Behavior overrides. That's cool.
And they're using tools meta within this, it looks like. Yeah, Gizmo Creator. That's what I thought they were doing.
The model
Yeah,
itself
it's the same
too.
basic. It's the same basic schema that they exposed through the assistant API. So yeah,
it's the same assistant API.
Yeah, the schema that like they're passing up with like the tool ID and so forth. That's basically the same API.
But they have all these private magic things
Yeah,
that we can't use.
I would say that at this point they probably exposed about 90% of
That's good.
APIs, 80 to 90%. I would say there are
really
some
cool.
known limitations that they have, because they have to support this at scale. And like I said, we were talking internally at Microsoft that like unless they work out how to avoid the polling thing, they're probably not going to be able to get it out of preview. But they're trying to actually connect me with someone over there so that I can give them some thoughts for it. Like I said, I know how to do this without having to do the polling. Hopefully they'll connect me with someone on their side and I can talk about how they should.
Hey, Steve, do you, and if you can't talk about this, it's fine, but do you know if Azure is getting the GPT-4 Turbo models, or like when
They
that's
will
happening?
be, right? They run about a month behind.
Okay.
But yeah, in theory, everything is just like 2 or 3 weeks delayed before. That's the other side to the assistant stuff. There's a question mark within Microsoft as to whether or not the assistant stuff will go to Azure. There is no freaking way that Azure would allow a polling API. And so, well, I don't know what's going to happen on that path, but anyway, they'll figure it out. They have a lot of smart people also. So.
That's interesting.
The 128K thing, though, I agree with you. That's like off the charts. I'm just curious what is that going to cost? Like $4 a call, even at 50% off, right? So, that's still pretty pricey.
Okay, so
it does seem. The GPT-4 Turbo does seem pretty fast. It's still a little bit slower than 3.5. I would say the calls that I'm seeing are taking about 4 to 5 seconds. So it's pretty good. It's faster.
So it's asking, is there a particular writing level common chances to focus on tailored learning pace? Super advanced. Okay, so let's paste this. I think it keeps asking me questions. Can you convert this to American English? See how that is. Okay.
It did it. I see color without a U.
Yeah.
Was it only the word color that was really unique, or was there
There's
some
there
wording?
I think there's the cancellation. There's like 1L versus 2. I always forget
We
which
could
one's which, but
we could grab an excerpt of the British Harry Potter, not
All
to
right.
not to platform JK, but it would be really fun to like change snogging to like kissing or something
Yeah,
with
paste it in
this.
the chat and I'll copy.
Yeah, let me try to find that.
Okay. But the configure page is also really cool where you can specify what you want the conversational starter is. So I think we saw it earlier. It was popping up on the right side. It's giving us a couple options to click into. And then you can toggle abilities. And the other thing that's really cool is knowledge. Like it does retrieval. You can upload a file of your choice and you can ask questions according to the PDF document. We can try that too. Let me make sure I have a PDF somewhere.
And these are all features that are available via the assistance API as well too. You can do file uploads. I think the main thing that you can't do currently is file downloads. They don't have that right yet.
Yeah, which is why like when someone was saying writing a word to a file, that is hard, right? Unless you call like a third-party API to do that.
Yeah.
Sasha, I linked a site that has a perfect like comparison of the two Harry Potter versions. You could maybe use that just to train it on the creation side.
Oh, that sounds good.
And then that way it actually understands like what it's looking for.
But I guess this format, should I just copy everything?
I would just just raw everything into it.
Like so I'm just gonna copy in the configures. Like so
I also wonder how it handles use cases that are outside of the scope of the original configuration. Like for instance, if we could get some transcript of somebody speaking a very heavy Irish or Scottish dialect, it would be interesting to.
It actually would. I can already tell you it's going to.
It probably would, right? If we ask it in the prompt,
you
most
could
likely.
you could give it Spanish and it would correct your grammar, right? It's uncanny that it actually doesn't really care that the prompt's in English and the speaker is
us.
It's more for us, right?
Yeah.
So it is very adaptable.
So you're never going to get
all of
that
these
unless you explicitly ask it to. You're never going to get the I'm sorry, but as a GPT configured for English to British, grammar, or anything like that, it would just do the job.
Yeah,
You could probably give it a rule that's just like if given anything other than English, prompt to ask for something else or something.
Yeah, I will tell you that like in my testing, and this is mainly with 3.5, that if you have a prompt that's all written in English and you give it just a very short word in Spanish, it will stick with English, like a short phrase. But if you give it long enough utterance, and then especially once it sees that in the conversation history, it will just switch fluently to Spanish and start speaking everything in Spanish.
The multilingual stuff is really interesting.
Yeah.
Almost
Which
a little
actually,
too
so
good.
Here's what we're going to actually see, like whenever with what the shift that I'm seeing just in the code that I'm writing is that the prompt engineering actually comes out of the instruction guidance that you give it, and it goes into your tool responses, right? And so what I'm finding is that I had to make all of my tools return strings, and then I have to basically tell it things like, okay, what's the weather, right? Here's the weather in Seattle is this. And then I have to add on a phrase that says, think about your next action. And that prompts it into like going through its monologue and reasoning what it wants to do next.
Yeah.
And
I
so
have
the
something
prompt
similar in my
engineering
custom instructions.
Yeah. The prompt engineering just moves into your tool, right? And the responses that you send from your tools.
Have you played with the JSON output?
I have not.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead, Sasha.
Oh, I personally have not, but Steve might have.
Yeah,
I have a very
I make
small
it
amount.
return. I make it return JSON. So
And now it'll do it by default. So
it still returns
saves
it
you the
as a
effort.
string. It
Oh,
returns it
okay.
as a string. You have to parse it. You have to realize
Yeah.
it may not be correct, right? I was trying to work out if I could add, because I have this whole JSON schema validation tree that I can do, and I can give it
Mhm.
a feedback to get it to correct its responses, but I don't know how to make that work with assistance at this point. So I'm just kind of, I'll be curious to see. They're probably going to hallucinate tools, and they will probably hallucinate parameters from time to time.
Yeah.
I
They
wonder
haven't.
if I wonder if it could be broken as well in any way for the JSON schema thing.
Oh, you could just, I can already tell you how to break it,
I'm
right?
sure. Yeah.
All you got to do is you give it a list of tools that's like, called like get weather. You just tell it, call the tool get weather for every city, and it will call that function. And that tool doesn't exist. That's how I test all my hallucination, right? So it's super easy to break.
That's interesting. Okay. So, um, that's really cool stuff. That's a really cool demo. I'm looking forward to getting a
Yeah.
chance to use it.
I actually did have one more question about the GPTs, plural specifically, is the way I understand it is they're not giving, like, you can't create, your own GPT and then use it as your model. Like, the way I understand it is that's what the agent or the assistant API is made for.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, I don't see why not. If you're the one that created the GPT, it would be great to just like also have it as an assistant, accessible. But
Yeah, it's interesting because all you technically need is the assistant ID,
right,
and
right.
do everything else you need from there.
So we'll see. Maybe it'll open up.
Yeah, I doubt that they'll cross pollinate like that, and I don't know.
Or at
It's
least it'll
interesting.
get easier to do both if you need to, maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
Pretty cool
yeah.
though.
That's very cool stuff.
All right. So real quick, I wanted to talk about some changes to the agent protocol um, repo here that we're going to be making. Where last week we talked about converting it back into a mono repo, and there's a pull request out now for that. There's some changes that need to be made for the packages and the CI/CD pipeline. But I've been looking at these mono repo structures, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it makes sense to do it in this way, as you can see in the Agent Protocol meeting notes, of having apps that contain applications like the Agent Protocol doc site, the CLI, things like that. Packages, which include anything that would be PyPy or NPM packages that get pushed out, like the client and the SDK and everything. Tools, which would be where we might move the testing suite because it's not necessarily a package and it's not necessarily an application, and it's more something to help out with the whole thing. And then changing the folder for the schema into spec because it kind of fits terminology a little bit better, and then keeping the RFCs folder the way it is. Anybody have an issue with that sort of setup for the monorepo sort of structure?
That sounds good with me.
All right. And the other thing was I was considering, I've been looking at this conventional commits, which is where they have the feat and fix and then a scope, and then any breaking changes would include the breaking change tag. And the idea here would be that the scope would be the package or application that's being edited, like the Python SDK or the spec itself and things like that. And we could build a CI/CD pipeline around the pull requests to get those things automatically version controlled and everything, and use that as well for the pipeline into the repositories for the packages and the applications and anything like that. I think that's a pretty good move to go for changing the not the code of conduct, but the contribution guidelines, and hopefully getting some automation into the pull requests so that anybody that makes changes there, everything's kind of a little bit neater. And besides that, that's pretty much it for the actual agent protocol repository side. If anybody has any issues with that, then the somebody mentioned the artifact naming. I believe that was somebody earlier in the agent protocol channel that was talking about how the artifact, the terminology of artifact, like why we have it as artifact and not just file. What do y'all think about the concept of renaming it from artifact to file, or file to artifact, or anything like that? And what's the difference? What's the trade-offs, or does it even matter?
I think people in the channel so far have stood behind the term artifact. I think both John and Steve really had good points. Steve is coming from the research perspective, and John is kind of also like, if any of you guys want to like jump in and talk about your perspective here, that would be
Yeah, John has a good summary of like the missing things, right? It's not a generic container yet. That's what it needs to be turned into. Do you
Mhm.
want to weigh in, John?
Yeah, that's the main problem. I was integrating with Auto GPT, and since I don't have a persistent file system, I kind of had to just cram a URL into I think it's file name parameter or
Mhm.
property on artifact. So it doesn't really work for my use case. I have to
Now,
make
would
some
that work better
assumptions.
if we changed file name to URI or something along those lines?
Yeah, and then I think you need maybe like the file, byte length as well, and then content type. So there's tons of specs that we could base it on,
Yeah.
but I think it just basically needs to become more generic.
If you'd be
Yeah, I would
interested,
actually say that file name is normally just display name, right? Like if you look at like any sort of attachment format, right? You normally have a content type, which is a MIME type field. You have a content field that can be optional, but that's where you're basically, whatever the text of the artifact is, right? And then there's a couple of other adjacent fields because sometimes you don't have content. You have like a URL, right? Or a URL that points to, technically it probably should be a URL. The difference between a URI and a URL is the URI is not something that theoretically can be fetched with a web protocol. So like URL is what would be fetchable. And then file name is often there, but it's literally just the display name. And so that's like it should be like foo.jpg, right?
would you
So
be
it's normally
interested?
never has.
You or John, would you be interested in making an RFC for this change?
Yeah, I think John and I could work on that.
Okay, that sounds good. That
And
sounds.
John also brought up like the immutability. Um, I don't have a super strong opinion about whether or not, like, I believe that any sort of individual artifact that comes back should be immutable. That doesn't mean that the thing that's backing that, because you want to treat this like it's a log, right? Like once you've read something, you've seen something, you don't want to worry that you need to go back and look at it again. So once something is like sent, like an artifact, that's a log, right? Okay. But the thing that backs it can be updated. But as John mentioned, if you want to say that the underlying file can be updated, you need actually two fields. You need created at and updated at, so that then someone can read through and work out from the log that this file was modified, this artifact was modified 3 times on these various dates. That doesn't mean that you need to be able to refer back to the underlying changes each, but it needs to have updated out if you want to support artifacts that can be mutable.
Yeah, I know that timestamps aren't part of the spec currently. That could also be a candidate for another RFC as well, because I
Yeah.
know just everything kind of needs some timestamps in general. But yeah, that sounds good.
And I would say, John, that with regards to relative path, URL can actually cover both because you can always do file colon to say that something's a local.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just talking instead of file name, I meant to refer to relative
Yeah.
path to
Yeah.
change to a URL or URI.
I would just, if you're going to call it file name, I would just, it's best to think of that as display name, right? That's normally how they're treated in like attachments. But as you said, there's lots of specs out there that you can go off of, right? Attachments, MIME attachments. There's, like we've been doing this for multiple decades. So.
Has anybody given thought to how the versioning should work? So if we did change something like artifact, it would be a breaking change potentially.
We have, but we haven't
yet.
actually written it down anywhere. The concept here was that only breaking changes would update the version scheme, so that instead of using like /AP/v1.2/agent, we would just go to version 2 and try to keep things for major changes only for the API or something along those lines. But I don't think that's written down anywhere, so that's something that we could definitely look at doing as well.
Yeah, it might be wise to also have some amount of planning. So if we're doing multiple breaking changes, we don't quickly go from like V1 to V4, within a month or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that you have like the V1 and then you have a next, right? The V2 and then really I think you want to let V2 bake for a while is what I would say. And so there may be a period of time where some agents support both the V1 and the V2 just to get further feedback and let it bake.
That's possible, yeah. I know that right now a lot of the changes that are sort of slated for this V2 are like the info endpoint. I think we talked about creating a config object within the info endpoint to describe what the additional input and additional output would look like. So there's those concepts. I know we've been talking about the plugin system, but that one hasn't been really nailed down. So I'm not sure if that's going to be part of a V2 or not, but I would like for it to be because I see that as being very useful.
I sorry to interject a little bit. All of this is kind of kept up on the issues page on the GitHub page on the agent protocol side. We added a next milestone or V2 flag. The things that are planned for the next milestone, aka V2, is there. That's with the specific tag, next feature tag. So sorry, Zane, to interrupt, but
No, that's perfect.
yeah.
I had kind of forgotten about the milestone there, but that's a good thing to bring up. So everything's there, and then if we needed to add more or wanted to add more, then that's definitely the place that we could do it, and we could have those discussions as well. If anybody has anything in mind, we could figure something out. But that's all there in the GitHub issues. So yeah.
And separately, also, so because I was in Dev Day yesterday, I was kind of like chatting with a few folks from OpenAI. I wonder what a collaboration with them could potentially look like, because one thing that I personally am really passionate about is multi-company collaboration that elevates everybody. So OpenAI wants to do things that are good for OpenAI, but like, what about the entire ecosystem? What about other LLM providers? And so I chatted with Michelle, who is the API lead, that gave the demo for the assistants with the threads, runs, and the messages API. And I told her that I felt like there's so much like similarity between this and agent protocol. Like, I wonder if it makes sense for us to like sit down and consolidate some of it so that it can be a more generic thing for everybody to use, and not just like OpenAI people who are using OpenAI, right? And so I sent a few emails yesterday. They said please reach out, and so we'll see what that collaboration looks like. And if any of you guys are interested in like coming to join the meetings that I have with them, also let me know, and I would, obviously the more the merrier to kind of like define what that looks like in the initial stages.
Sounds great. I probably would be interested, depending on timing.
An interesting observation that I've been making is that OpenAI has basically kind of set the standard for the REST interface for talking to an LLM. Like I've noticed that like in pretty much every OSS project, like they basically make their the model look exactly like OpenAI's APIs, right? So I'm curious to see if the same thing's going to happen on the agent side. I doubt it because the protocol really sucks, whereas their completion protocol was really simple. So there is an opportunity here to basically help push them towards a better kind of more open protocol that they adopt, and then the world we know will just follow suit from there.
Yeah. I think also just want to be careful that like we don't want to do something that's like too much in their favor that makes it incompatible with like other LLM providers. So there's also something going along to say like we maybe want to do something like that's like that their current schema complies to, but what we provide is really a minimum set, like a smaller set of things that other providers can also use. And so maybe that's the approach as well, and not just letting OpenAI drive like where the industry goes,
No, I
etc.
would agree with that. That's kind of what I'm saying, is actually push them in a better direction, right?
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
might try to take a stab at getting the agent protocol to create a server head for talking to the assistance platform. That'll at least illustrate to me any further issues that the protocol has.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
I love
Steve,
that.
I'm also thinking of taking a stab at a similar process. Maybe not the agent protocol first, but I would definitely try it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you could tackle the Python side, I can do the JavaScript side. So that would at least illustrate like if there's issues with the current agent protocol, right?
Yeah.
Marrying
And
to this. I'm not
yeah,
anticipating anything, but I just won't know until I dig in.
great. And John, does that sound okay with the JavaScript side? Steve was signing you up for the JavaScript side. I just want to make sure before
No,
I
I
put you
was
down.
signing up for the JavaScript side and signing John up for the Python side.
Oh, okay. I see.
I'm not a
Steve.
Python.
Okay, you're
Same.
not a
So
Python.
I'm not a
Oh, you guys
Python guy
can both
either.
work on the
Oh,
JS
you're
side.
not a Python. Well, because then John and I will work on the JavaScript.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. I'm not a Python guy.
I'm such a Python person, so maybe I can.
Well, then you can just port like whatever, use GPT to port like our code over Python.
And we can make an agent for it.
Yeah. That's funny because like all of my projects, I have Python versions of them all, but everyone, like I always enlist someone else from the community to do it. So,
Oh, great. We have a lot of
yeah.
we have some spicy opinions on Python by John in the chat, and as well as people wanting to contribute to the JavaScript side. Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I did make a bunch of bugs on the JavaScript version that were kind of obvious issues, and I could try to take a look at doing some PRs to fix those things whenever I'm in there.
Everyone hating on Python in the chat. Anyway,
Hey, don't get me wrong. We got plenty of hate for JavaScript too. We just use it more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the world is Java. That's the irony. Like whenever I watched the thing that got me involved with the foundation is I watched the AI summit. I found it interesting that this entire movement is all geared around Python, but now everyone's using Python to build developer tools for JavaScript developers because there's far more JavaScript developers than there are Python developers. And most, I don't want to bash on Python devs, but most like the more kind of engineering focused stuff is around the JavaScript world at this point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I
mean, all the React stuff, right? So.
Yeah. Okay, there's some additional there's so much spiciness. John, thanks for the spice.
I see that. I see the Rust comment there. Yeah. Rust is
okay.
cool. I do like Rust.
I've never written a single line of Rust, but I hopefully want to learn Rust through ChatGPT.
It's awesome.
Yeah, Rust is awesome. Like, especially if you're an old school C++ developer like me, like Rust is like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, the Rustlings repository is actually the best way to start, I think, if you consider just ChatGPT. But that's
Rustling. Can you send the link?
Yes, I can. It's basically a list of tests, and you just fix all of the code per test, and it makes like this whole course for you. It's really intuitive. But yeah,
awesome.
Rustlings.cool.
Cool. So we have about like 8 minutes, and I kind of want to go through a couple kind of announcement type of things. One is I had a meeting with Postman, and it went really well. And they basically, so it's the Postman public API network team, and they said that they will be interested in ingesting agent protocol to be a part of their public API network. And so they are sending me some like documentation, which I will share, and obviously appreciate any community member to help with setting that up. Zane might have volunteered, and if Zane is busy, maybe someone else who's interested can help set it up. But essentially, we're going to create a team for agent protocol and show some of our example endpoints there, and we'll get a verified badge. And then we can also do a guest block on the Postman system as well. So I will send over the info as soon as I have some, and post it in our chat in our Discord. The other things, we have events that are awesome. Someone's adding more events as we speak. We have the Wednesday 9 a.m. This is all in PST time. So apologize for people that are more global. I think just like do some like online conversion to for the time zone. But Wednesday PST at 9 a.m. To Thursday late evening, we're holding a emergency hackathon. This is in SF, but if you are remote, we also have a category that we're currently baking right now, an online category for people to compete in as well. And so we want to just allow this to be as accessible as possible. With the SF event, we're also not capping. We want everybody to be able to participate. And then Wednesday at 5:30 p.m., we have a recap event, which me and Charles Fry, he was in one of the weekly meetings with us. I believe 2 weeks ago, we're creating a recap presentation on some of the key things that's discussed, show some demos, etc. And we're doing it Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. And we also have a few people signed up to do demos. We have people coming from Adela, Human Signal, showcasing the open source Adela agent. And that's more aimed for data collection. And so that's really very exciting. And I believe Steve-O is giving a demo on Teams AI as well Wednesday, right, Steve-O?
That's correct.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome.
Where will that be?
So that will be in SF.
Okay.
Yeah, in like the address is 500 Treat, but we also because Steve-O is based in Seattle, we'll also do Zoom, and we'll record everything and post it onto our YouTube channel, same as before. Yes.
Perfect.
The
Yeah,
presentation.
I think I'm the only remote presenter at this point, so sorry.
We may have
gotta
a
rep
few
the
more.
remote.
Yes, gotta rep the remote. Yes.
There are dozens of
And
us.
Mm.
and whoever added the code hangout, do you want to kind of talk about it?
Yeah, that was me. So this
Okay.
last Friday, I ended up spending some time with HJ going over the CLI, and he had some questions and questions that were more generalized across the agent protocol. And I thought, hey, this is actually really good timing on a Friday if anybody's around at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time or whatever time zone that is for you. Drop in. We're going to be hanging out in the lounge and just going over some code. And if anybody's got questions about the agent protocol or about any specific code elements involving the SDKs or the clients or anything, we'll be in there. So just drop by, and I'm going to try and make that a weekly thing so that there's more sort of code focus discussions that can happen. And that's pretty much it for that one.
Yay! All right. Three more minutes. Anybody has anything? Getting very excited to a lot of building energy after yesterday. There was an after party that I think Grimes was playing at, and a bunch of us did not go, and we just went back and hacked. So it just felt like there was a lot of hacking energy.
Yeah, we
Jen,
were chomping at the bit for the 1 p.m. release. I was literally watching their GitHub repos and I saw them building it and everything. So yeah, it was cool.
that's exciting. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
awesome. And Jem said 100%, yes. And only going to get easier to be remote in person with mixed reality soon.
Yeah.
Back. All right. I will give the 2 minutes back to you guys unless anyone has anything else. And feel free to stay in the channel and chat after. I think maybe Zane can stop the recording.
Alrighty, stopping it here.